All right. So we are live. All right. Kody and Obi, thank you very much for joining me on the Magic Internet Money podcast. This is
Thank you.
something that, yeah, you're welcome. Something that I've been excited to kind of have a conversation with because I feel like I'm slowly starting to understand Fedi and how important Fedimint is going to be. It took me a while, and I regret not paying closer attention to it at the beginning. I just figured it was like something like the Liquid network, but like did more federated options or something like that. And I didn't realize how big Fedimint and things like Chami and eCash systems are going to be for the future of Bitcoin. So this conversation, hopefully we'll get into that, and then maybe I have some misconceptions or preconceived notions around what Fedimint is going to do for Bitcoin, and hopefully you guys can help me with that, and also try to understand this from the perspective of regular people. I make this podcast for friends and family and entrepreneur friends and stuff like that who aren't necessarily hardcore Bitcoiners, and just try to have conversations with folks like yourselves that are doing like really cool stuff and dispel the myth that Bitcoin's boomer coin and nobody's building on Bitcoin and all the fun stuff's happening in crypto and whatever else that some people may come with preconceived notions of. So thanks a lot for coming on the show, and why don't we start with some introductions?
Okay. You're facing sideways, but I'm actually below you. And you're above me, by the way. So my name is Obi, and I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Fedi. And Fedi exists to accelerate adoption of Bitcoin, Lightning, Fedimint, and all other freedom technologies, as we like to call them. And that's who I am.
And
Awesome.
I'm Kody. I'm the head of developer and product support at Fedi. And so I've been doing open source Bitcoin development for like a little over 2 years now. And I started working on Fedimint, the protocol, about a year ago. That's where I got introduced to Eric and Justin. And then I came on to Fedi just a little while ago. Right. And I think kind of just like you, right? Of like when you initially interact with Fedimint, like it's kind of confusing to see how that fits in. But I think Obi does a really good job of kind of giving an outline for like first party, third party, how there's this missing custody layer in between. And so like I think that's probably a good kickoff point.
You're very quickly going to see where the Mutual Appreciation Society will all be like, tapping each other on the back. But anyway.
I like to kind of, just before we get into that, maybe I've met Kody before. We've had a couple phone calls because I started to dive down the rabbit hole of AI and started coming up with all these ideas of how we need like a libertarian Bitcoiner AI system, LLM, that we can train models off of and Bitcoiners can use. And so I started getting into like who's building what in the AI scene. Discovered Kody and Lalu had entered a hackathon with some pretty cool Bitcoin tech a couple months ago or a month ago. Yeah, a couple months ago. And I started putting people together in a chat room of like anybody that's sort of working on Bitcoin AI stuff. And so I've kind of gotten to know Kody a little bit. But I've never spoken to you before, Obi, and I'm not sure, like maybe it would be useful if we kind of start off not just with intros of who we are, but like how'd you get into Bitcoin? Like maybe a little bit of that without going back to 2009 when you created Bitcoin, but maybe the public story.
I don't know. The public story is from 2011. So
okay, nice.
I became aware of Bitcoin then. Just as background, I am a geek. I studied computers. I was building neural networks in secondary school, in fact. And I studied computer science and cognitive science in university. So it wasn't called AI then because it was a long time ago, but it's basically AI. And my final graduate project was a fault-controlled mouse code, so using neural networks to read your brainwaves to figure out whether you're thinking up, down, left, right. So I've had an interest in AI for a very, very, very long time. If I count my interest, Bitcoin, AI are very similar. So there's a lot of crossover between myself and Kody in terms of interest in the space. But yeah, 2011, I was running a company at the time, a previous company, and a number of people came along and said, "There's this Bitcoin thing. You'll love it because it combines tech plus it's this meritocratic money." And I'm really into meritocracy, where not a quality of outcomes, but a quality of opportunity. And I just think the world loses out by not having that. Right now, worldwide, there must be 50 Einsteins, 50 Elon Musk sailors out there. But because we don't have systems to surface them up, only one in a generation gets found. And we all lose out because of that. So a big part of that problem is the money. And when I saw Bitcoin, I thought, well, this is very interesting, really elegant tech. But I was still running my company. 2 years later, I sold that company, and my soon-to-be co-founder at the time came along and said, "Look, we should try and set up a Bitcoin exchange." And I looked, Bitcoin, the little amount of Bitcoin I'd bought at the time was worth a lot more. And I could see Bitcoin was not just great technology, but had staying power. And I went up and we went up and set in 2013 a Bitcoin exchange. It became the UK's longest running Bitcoin exchange, one of the longest running in the world. We did this thing called provable solvency. We were the first and longest running to do that. We were 70% market share in the UK. We got listed on New York Stock Exchange, all that sort of stuff. Long enough for me to know that was called CoinFloor. It was eventually, for my sins, part of it was sold off to a company that ended up setting up CoinFlex, which had its own drama. But the other part was sold on when I sold it in 2021 to Coin Corner, because one of the other people in the space I thought was focused on the UK market and was committed to Bitcoin. We had other people who wanted to buy it from other parts of the world, but they would have turned it into a sort of a multi-coin company, and we weren't really interested in that. So yeah, but that was prior to Fedi and Fedimint, and around the time I sold, I was looking for ways to get people off exchanges. Because after 8 years of running a Bitcoin exchange and seeing the direction of travel, I realized that we needed to get people to self-custody. So we really tried for multiple years, and we realized that no matter how hard we tried, we're probably not going to get more than single-digit percentages of our customers to self-custody. But we needed a way to still get them off exchanges and to be able to start that journey. And so while looking for that, I met first the inventor of Fedimint and my first co-founder, Eric, and then later Justin, my second co-founder. And I was introduced to the Fedimint protocol, and I was smitten. I could see immediately that this was a way to get people at scale off exchanges. But the more you looked at it, the more you realize this is way more than that. So initially, Eric saw it as this incredible privacy technology. I then saw it and realized it's a privacy technology that also provided a way of scale of custody off exchanges at scale. And then later on, you realize it's also a way of scaling Bitcoin at the layer 3 or layer 2. It also allows expressivity. You can add any functionality or feature you wanted to it as well. So when you combine Fedimint with Lightning and Bitcoin, it completed the Bitcoin ecosystem. And now, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. So over time, people will start to realize more and more how these work so well together and allow us to do anything that you would want to be able to do just within Bitcoin today.
Amazing. We'll get into that more soon. Kody, do you want to give us how you got into Bitcoin origin story?
Yeah, sure. So I was much later into Bitcoin, so I was not very, very early like Obi was. I only came into Bitcoin about 2.5 years ago, and for me, I went to college for thinking I was going to go down the finance route, like my dad had been. And when I'm there, I start reading Nassim Nicholas Taleb, right? And this was before Saifedean kind of broke his brain, right? But you kind of start realizing that everything I'm learning in school doesn't really apply. And so I'm like, okay, well, this whole investment banking route that I was going to go. Doesn't really work anymore. And so I'm like walking around campus, and they've got like the Marines have set up a pull-up bar, and they're like, hey, if you can do 23 pull-ups, like we want to talk to you. And I was like, 23 pull-ups, anyone can do that. And so
in a row?
So then they catch me, and then I end up going Marine side. And like that's kind of like a funny way to talk about it, but like really more of it was like I wanted to learn how to lead, and I was a very idealistic person in terms of the founding of the United States and like all the things that we talk about within Bitcoin. Like at the time, I was like the best representation of that is the idea of the United States, of property rights, like the whole idea of that, like you can become an American just by adopting these ideas, right? Of like very touching stories of people that I've interacted with where, you know, it's like they become an American, they say, hey, I was always an American, I just wasn't born here, right? It's like I believed in freedom, like I believed in property rights, I believed that like I could make something of myself if I really applied myself and that sort of thing. And so joining in the Marine Corps and meeting a lot of guys like that and getting to lead guys like that was just like an unbelievable privilege, right? And
you got to lead them?
Yeah, so I was a rifle platoon commander in the Marine Corps.
Oh,
and
awesome.
so I was an infantry guy, and so like, you know, this is why me becoming a developer was kind of like a real left turn, right? Because like,
wait,
you know,
so 21 pull-ups in a row with no breaks?
It's
23.
23.
23? I got the Bitcoin 21 in my head. With
Yeah.
no breaks?
Yeah.
Damn.
You know, yeah, but that's you know, you got to be able to do
almost as
stuff
impressive
like that
as 2011 Bitcoin.
Okay. Thanks, Brad. So like join in there, right? And like become a rifle platoon commander. As a platoon commander, you've got like 40 guys under you, and you're responsible for everything that they do, everything that they don't do, like everything that happens within their lives, basically. And the reason why is because like you have to take a personal interest in all their lives, like know your Marines and look out for their welfare, is because in the event that there's something personal going on with them, right, that's like causing a lot of psychological stress, like that can affect their time on the job, and like it's a life or death sort of job, you know. And so one of the things that I did was I took, since I had this like background of like understanding finance, like a lot of these guys hadn't been to college. A lot of these guys didn't have like come from good like homes where they were like taught good financial practices, like saving, those sorts of things. So you take a good interest in their lives. And one of the things I really distinctly remember this was kind of the thing that like everyone's kind of like, they need to be ready for Bitcoin is like kind of my perspective on this, was that I remember sitting down with one of my Marines and kind of walking him through his financial planning for this stuff. And I was like, it really doesn't matter what you do. You're never going to be able to afford the house that you want to buy. Like, just, it's not going to work. And the reason why it was a big thing that hit me was that he had just been looking at it of this is what the house costs today, and then modeling that out. But I was looking at, okay, you have to apply the rates that this house is going to increase, right? And this house that you want to buy is going up at like 15% a year or so, right? So you're never going to be able to catch up and purchase this house that you want to do. And so that was sort of like my first sort of inkling of like, hey, there's something wrong here, right? And then I eventually arrived at Bitcoin. And the reason why I did that was because while I was on deployment, we were a crisis response company. So like, you know, we hop on birds and go around to different places in the Middle East, like coronavirus happens. And so while I'm leading Marines, I'm like really not focused on anything else. Like, you know, the joke in the Marine Corps is like, if the Marine Corps wanted you to have a family, they would have issued you one. Right? Is that, you know, you really got to be focused on the guys and like you really focus on them exclusively. And so once coronavirus happens and we all start getting locked in our rooms and like we really can't do anything, like I have these long watches at tactical operation centers, but like, you know, there's no phones ringing anymore, right? Because like everything is locked down, like, you know, like nobody's going anywhere. And so you get a lot of time to start reading, start looking up on this other stuff. And one of the things I encountered was that on the government computers where you're stuck in the talk for like 12 hours, 24 hours at a time, right, is that Bitcoin.org wasn't blocked on the government computers. And so like, you know, I start reading Bitcoin.org and I start like going through it. That was like my first exposure to Bitcoin of this, was
Really?
getting
Wow,
to
cool.
like go through Bitcoin.org because it wasn't blocked. And so that's what sort of sets me up there. And then as I start deciding to go into Bitcoin, the thing that I really liked in the Marine Corps was this culture of every Marine a rifleman, where everyone gets trained as a rifleman before you go off and specialize in something else. Because insofar as you're in the organization, you exist to support the rifleman, right? Like the whole reason why we have cooks, the reason why we have supply guys, the reason why we have pilots, the reason why we have lawyers within the Marine Corps in the organization is because there's an 18-year-old with a team of other 18-year-olds and they're going to be jumping in a hole, and you have to understand how you can support that guy. And so coming into Bitcoin, I knew that if I wanted to be like as valuable as I could within Bitcoin, then I had to learn how to code. I had to become a developer because even if I go off and do something else, I have to know how I can best support that guy, because the reason why we're all here is to create the infrastructure and to create sort of like the environment within the Bitcoin industry to make it so that people can build and develop better software that we can deploy at a larger scale, right? And so go down the developer path. And so like ever since then, I've just been really focused on like the developer education, empowering other developers, like, you know, like learning myself, but also like being very much of a teacher of like helping other developers find good projects to like, explore those projects and stuff as you can come on with them. So Bitcoin development side of things.
Nice. Are you so Obi, are you on the development side as well, or more so on the business side and the finance side of things? Like, what's your role at Fedimint?
So no, I'm the CEO. So I'm the person who, I mean, if you want to put it, I'm the person who doesn't actually do anything. Basically, you know, I helped the first year of the company. I was very much focused on fundraising. So over the last year, we raised 20.
Good job on that. You guys have
Thank
done
you.
very well on that side of things. One of the most successful stories in Bitcoin so far for fundraising.
Thank you. But
was it 21 in the end?
21.21. Yeah.
What a number.
So, you know, so that was a big part of what I had to do last year. Also, I just had to make sure people understood how powerful the potential of Fedimint and Fedi, less so Fedi in the last year. Over the coming year, we're going to talk more about Fedi and how it's also going to help to empower communities everywhere, and also make sure we win by ensuring the entire Bitcoin ecosystem wins. And we'll do that but we tend to want to do it through proof of work, and you're going to see it through our actions as opposed to talking about it so much. So whereas last year was lots of talking, lots of evangelizing, this year will be just lots of just through actions.
Oh, I can't wait.
But you know, I go and I do what's needed at the time. So now that we've fundraised, we've got an incredible group of investors from all across the ecosystem who are just amazing. I could list through, but you'll know all the names, who share our mission and vision, and also built the initial team, the sort of senior team who are going to take us through to our targets. And worked with the team as well, because we're a team, we're a family. We're also a community and a family work together to define what our goal is. And we're now delivering on that goal. So I'm now switching to sort of growth, adoption, sales, CEO, just making sure when I mean selling, I'm selling Bitcoin, I'm selling Lightning, I'm selling Freedom Technologies as opposed to selling a company. So that's what's going to be the sort of my modus operandi for the next 12 to 24 to 36 months. But our eventual goal, our eventual mission is to get billions of people using these freedom technologies. And we know that now is possible with the suite of features that are there and are mature enough. Bitcoin is incredibly mature. You're seeing with all the news, even in the last week or two, it was obvious to us and in the space, but it's becoming obvious more widely. Lightning is also incredibly mature. If you look at all of the incredible companies who are supporting and willing to provide the infrastructure for it, it's there. And the last piece was, how do we scale Lightning to an even greater level to support billions of users? How do we add the expressiveness needed to add more complex pieces of functionality to support our desires? And how do we also make the ability to custody, hold, backup, and maintain a level of privacy of your money and your data easy as well? And that's where Fedimint comes in. With those three combined, we can do whatever we wish. The sky is the limit. There's nothing else we need to do, just time and passion. And as you can see from people like Kody, we have the passion.
Yeah, if I can just add real fast, because I think when you asked that question first, right, of like, hey, Obi, what are you focused on within here, right? Like, I think Obi is a great example of that, like, you know, every Marine rifleman, like every Bitcoiner, a developer, of that Obi has this background in software development and in AI and in like the technical side of things. And so like you see it throughout like the way that Fedi approaches these things and the way that Obi is kind of like, you know, like like guiding the organization for this, is that a lot of it is driven by an understanding of the engineering. And so like a lot of the engineering side and the development and what we're building like you can see that reflected in sort of the way that we're moving, which is like, I just think that like Obi is a really good example of that. So it's just the thing that occurred to me when you asked that question.
Yeah. I didn't mention, but I was a CTO for a number of very successful companies for 15 years before I became an entrepreneur. So computer science and cognitive science, and then I was a CTO for companies that were sold for a couple of billion. I was CTO of a massively multiplayer virtual world with 30 million users.
Oh, really?
So I know about. It was a company called WeWorld. We made these characters called Weemies, and there were these. They competed with people it was aimed at sort of teenagers and older children. So it was our sweet spot. So our target demographic was competing with people like Habbo Hotel, Club Penguin, and so on.
Right.
So but it was very, very popular. So I've done and chief application architect, all that sort of stuff. But I am now the CEO here. I'm on the commercial side, and the technical team and talent within Fedi and Fedimint just far surpasses me by several orders of magnitude. But I would consider myself a reasonably technical person, given the fact that I studied computer science and I was a CTO and a chief application architect for 15 years. But I would not put myself on the same level. These are some of the best engineers, and I've worked with hundreds. I've hired hundreds in multiple countries around the world. I've lived in India, set up 400-person development centers and all that sort of stuff. These are some of the best people I've ever worked with in my entire sort of multi-decade history.
Well, while we're talking about all of our accomplishments, I would just like to also say that I can drink 8 ounces of water a day if I really try.
I'm learning. Okay, that's water I'm really bad at, by the way. I've been told I can go a whole day and drink half a liter of water. So I'm learning. Oh, well, I love the orange color.
Yeah, I can drink water. I'm really good. Just as smart and valuable as you guys. No, this is awesome. Great to hear all this background. You guys are super.
I did tell you it's going to be the Mutual Appreciation Society. I did tell you that.
Yeah, but I think that this is, and maybe I don't know how far we want to go down here, but this is like.
Well, I don't mean to brag, Kody, but
cultural.
all 3 of my listeners are going to really appreciate what's coming into your mouth next. So continue.
No, but but we talk about the culture and the differences in development and those kinds of things, right? And so one of the things that I really like about Bitcoin, and this is one of the things that got me very deep into Bitcoin instead of going down the crypto side of things, right? Even after I get exposed to it, is that within Bitcoin there is this culture of sort of the every Marine rifleman, every Bitcoiner developer, an understanding of how Bitcoin works is very critical to as you go down the rabbit hole and these kinds of things. And when you look at sort of other industries or other components of crypto and just other things, you don't get that same thing, right? You talk to people and they're like, hey, I've been working in this industry for 5 years or so on or whatever, but I can't explain to you how a blockchain works or whatever, right? Or they say, oh, hey, I'm going to tokenize real estate or whatever. And that after 5 minutes of actually doing some research on that doesn't work, right? But then they've been working in the industry for 5 years doing that. But the reason why is because they haven't looked on the development side of technically what would be involved with doing those things. And they really focus more on the marketing. Is that within Bitcoin generally, especially within Fedimint, and why this is because Fedimint's a very complex technology. And I think this is something we're going to get to later. It takes a little bit to get to understand it. But once you do, it makes a lot of sense. And so, but in order for Obi to kind of do that, in order for us to kind of be successful as we roll out Fedimints to the broader communities and all that kind of thing, it does take an understanding of the underlying tech so that you can break it down and frame it in a way that's very useful and understandable and digestible for those for everybody else that we're onboarding.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think maybe another part of that too is that, well, I'd like to adopt that framework, but I mean, I'm not a developer, so I can't really relate to it quite good.
Not yet, but it's going to be. But the bar to being a developer is coming because of AI. Is coming down every single day.
True.
So what can be developed is just going to expand as more and more people are able to develop. So you should anyway. We'll let's not skip the conversation, but
maybe one thing that I'm good at, and I think most people in Bitcoin at least somewhat are good at, is logic and long-term thinking, which is very important for development, like pseudocode and logic of coding and things like that. So perhaps it's every Bitcoiner a logician or something. But you know, it's your analogy, so I'll let you keep it.
Yeah, well, maybe we can start going down this in terms of the AI side, right? Of like why there's kind of been this explosion recently, and why sort of Bitcoin comes in as this sort of scaling solution beyond this, is that the things that are really taking off right now are large language models, right? And so like for interacting with large language models, you can think about, like, I like to tell the story about Replic's large language model that they just released, because I think it kind of captures this, is that when they changed it from scratch, and they trained it over their internal code sort of like data sets that they were using, right? And they were training it over code, but sort of a byproduct of them training it over code was that it also can like output like just like standard English sentences and stuff, right? And so there's like some of that content in terms of the comments that are inside of the code that they're doing. But the thing they're primarily training it over with is code, and a byproduct of that is that it can like produce logical English as well. And so why was that happening? Well, because you can think about code, like when you're interacting with a computer, the computer is always right. It is doing exactly what you tell it to. It is doing exactly what you express it to. And the exercise of coding is being able to, can I logically explain what I want this computer to do in a way that the computer understands? And so with large language models, the way that we can think about it is that now you don't have to express it in code. You can express it in English, but it still becomes critically important for people to be able to express themselves logically. And so some of the people who are making the most out of this big AI move that we're going on there are not the people who are like classically trained technical. The people who are making the most out of it are the people who, like, you know, like lawyers are making an absolute heyday out of this. And the reason why is because they can think logically, they can structure large logical arguments. And so because of that, they can express to the AI exactly what they want it to do. And because they can express it in that way, in that logical format, they can get it to do the things that it wants to do. The kind of mental model I keep for myself is, at this point with AI, if the model's not doing what you want it to do, you're the problem, not the model, right? Of that, like, you have to improve your prompt engineering. You have to prove the way that you're interacting with it at that point, because it used to be like up until like a couple months ago that it's like there were just limitations of like, you're not going to be able to get it to do this thing, right? But now it's getting up to the point where you're really just limited by your creativity and your ability to logically express yourself, right? And so that's why learning a bit of coding, which forces you to learn a bit of logic, like on the thing that you're saying of like Bitcoiners are much more like kind of the logician side of things, that's going to become very, very useful as we like kind of go deeper down these like AI tooling.
Yeah, I've got a couple of friends that are in the AI space. One of my friends is like been hired to build out Oracle's LLM center or their data center. And like some of the things he's kind of telling me, just not giving me company secrets or anything, but he's just letting me know that like, hey, the things that we think are exciting about AI, it's like already they've got things that are better than that on the back end. And a lot of my smarter developer friends that are into AI are saying things like the value of being a coder is going to decrease unless you're like the top 1% of coders, because the AI is going to be able to do all of that coding.
The middle is going to be thinned out. The middle is going to be thinned out. Stuff that's normally many workaday or jobbing coders do will be able to be done by the actual customer, the client who would have normally brought someone else to do it. They can just interact with their own AI, either an AI in the cloud, if they don't worry about the privacy issues and so on, or an AI that's running in this federated community manner, if they want to have more control and more power, or potentially for very simple use cases, even on your own computer and on your laptop, and you can choose where you run it. But the point is, development will be your development will be a process of you having this interactive conversation with
Right.
your AI.
Well, okay, so I do want to get more into AI. I mean, it's one of the most exciting things happening in the planet right now, and the merger of Bitcoin and AI, which you guys are doing with along with Lightning Labs and others with the AI for All hackathon. We'll talk about that soon, but first, just from like the framework of me understanding the value of Fedimint and what Fedi is, let's kind of spend some time on that so I can, think about it more clearly. So I used to think of it, like I said earlier, that Liquid Network, for those who don't know, the Liquid Network is a side chain that was built by Blockstream, and Blockstream is one of the most important like development research groups in Bitcoin. They built a lot of technology for Bitcoin on the mining side, and they do confidential transactions stuff. A lot of the folks at that are Bitcoin core developers were supported somewhat altruistically by Blockstream in the early days, so that they would be able to keep working on Bitcoin and get paid a salary when Bitcoin's price was really low. So while they're not centrally important to Bitcoin, I mean, they're very valuable. They're one of the like network effects technically for Bitcoin. There's many groups that are valuable to Bitcoin. A lot of detractors to Bitcoin in the fork wars would go and say things like, "Oh, Blockstream centralized Bitcoin," they're, blah blah blah. That was just like FUD and propaganda. Blockstream, so it's like kind of a complicated thing that we have with Blockstream. If you want to be a decentralization maximalist and you want to remain intellectually like congruent with arguing about the importance of decentralization, a lot of people in the block size wars, when Bitcoin Cash and a lot of centralized entities like Coinbase and Bitmain and Roger Ver and all those guys decided to sort of attack Bitcoin Core as centralized, and Liquid was not Bitcoin and Liquid was more centralized, blah blah blah. The other way to go is Bitcoin Cash and bigger block sizes, etc. A lot of people threw out Liquid and Blockstream sort of like mentally to remain consistent with the decentralization maximalist arguments while having the block size debate. And I think there's like a bit of a PTSD or remnant still here from that whole like internal fork war. But in the end, like, it doesn't matter because there's so many very valuable, important groups now that are supporting Bitcoin development. So it's not centralized, but Blockstream is valuable and is important. And so the Liquid network is something that they built, which is a side chain that allows you to do things like stable coins and covenant-based smart contract, like financial contracts for things like dexes and swapping and NFTs, even for digital game items and stuff, things that you'd think of typically as like a crypto thing, that you can't do on the base layer of Bitcoin by design. You'd want to do it on layers and side chains. So we sort of had this development in Bitcoin that we're trying to maximize the censorship resistance of the base layer of Bitcoin and optimize the block size so that anybody anywhere in the world on any internet connection with any like consumer grade hardware could run a sovereign Bitcoin node and be able to validate their own transactions and have censorship resistant savings. That caused us to build in layers. So we went first to like side chains like Liquid network, then to the second layer like Lightning network, which is just built for the peer-to-peer cash use case. Typically it's just like, this is how we scale Bitcoin to a lot of people to use it for coffee purchases, etc. Then, then comes along all these other proposals, and Fedimint was one of them. And I was like looking at Fedimint, which I saw Blockstream was an early supporter of. So it's like kind of competitive to Liquid network. If you're thinking about it in this perspective, which most Bitcoiners I think still do, as a Fedimint, like they look at it like a side chain or a second or third layer of Bitcoin. Not quite sure how to think about it in that framing of like what we know so far. But as I'm investing in Bitcoin companies, and some of them are starting to actually talk about how they're going to be using Fedimint and Chaumian eCash tokens. Like there's another one called Cashew, which is like a Lightning network based one. But so I'm an investor in this company, Cloaked, and Cloaked is going to be doing like a VPN powered by the Lightning network, and also a potentially even a meshnet powered by the Lightning network. And they're talking about using eCash tokens. And so when they started talking about this, I'm like, okay, I really have to like think about Fedimint as like, what really is it? Because it's not really a competitive alternative to Liquid network. Liquid network is still a blockchain, and the Lightning network is not a blockchain. It's just a communication protocol for sending sats around. But as far as I understand it, Fedimint completely removes any scaling bottlenecks from sending Bitcoin around and having Bitcoin. It's actually like infinitely scalable, instantly possible to send Bitcoin over any other communication method. It's not quite, and maybe this is where you guys need to tell me, hey, you
Yeah,
don't
but
understand
and
quite.
each one has different trade-offs, but
Yeah.
the trade-offs are compensated by the others, I guess is the way to think
Yeah,
about it.
I think.
So this is
Yeah,
sorry.
do you think I could? I think I could do like a quick like Fedimint protocol summary, and I think Obi could kind of talk about for the Fedi side of like because Fedimint leads to Fedi is kind of the way.
Well, let me
I
finish
think
this
about
up. I'm almost done,
Yeah.
and then you tell me where I'm wrong, if I'm wrong.
Okay.
So I'm thinking about it from the perspective of just normal guy, not not a developer, whatever,
Yeah.
not technical, really, just like not quite intro 101 level, but like, Bitcoin is a base layer that we optimize for your savings. It's censorship resistant. Liquid network is like a second layer that's not as trustless. It's not as censorship resistant because you're trusting a federation of people, but you can do more things. You can do NFTs. You can do trading of or using stable coins, Tether, things like that. It's faster. It's more private, but it doesn't have the same censorship resistant, government resistant, sovereign properties of base layer Bitcoin. Lightning Network is just as trustless as the base layer, but it's more scalable, but it's only for payments. But there's still bottlenecks to getting 1 billion people using the Lightning Network. It just is not going to be able to be not, you're not going to be able to have 1 billion people using the Lightning Network in the next 5 years in a non-custodial way, like in a sovereign way. You'll have to give trade-offs. So you have to like trust centralized entities to like hold your keys, and then you can transact in the Lightning Network. But with the Fedimint system, it seems to me that it's like it's almost like envelopes that you put sats into. Like you put Bitcoin in these like envelopes and then send them around like you would send an email or a text message or a Telegram message or whatever, a Nostr note. And like that is the communication method. Like there's no blockchain, right? In Fedimint, there's no protocol for like worrying about scaling bottlenecks as far as I understand. Or maybe is that where
So
I'm
I'm happy to give a go in layman's terms of responding on this, but Cody, why don't
Yeah,
you
I think
want to
so.
try, and then I'll give you
Yeah, I
my
can give you like a
thoughts.
brief like kind of
At
protocol.
the high level for a consumer as
Yeah.
opposed to technical.
Yeah, I can give you kind of a brief protocol overview for this, right? And so like this is one of the things that I've really learned from Rusty Russell, who leads the Core Lightning project, is that he spent like 20 years doing Linux development before coming into Bitcoin. And like the thing that he came out of that was basically everything that's happening in Bitcoin happened in Linux, right? And everything that happened in Linux happened in the open internet, right? And so like the thing that I always keep in mind for this is that when you go to school and you learn about the internet, the way that they try to teach it is using the OSI, which is like the International Standards Organization model for how the internet stack works. So basically like, oh, there's 7 layers and everything collapses down those 7 layers and then is communicated across and then goes up. And there's this really amazing book called The Elements of Networking Style by one of the guys who built the DARPANET, which was like became the internet. And the thing that he says of like, hey, these guys were like the equivalent today of like crypto, of like they guys are just a bunch of money got thrown at them and they were going to try to make this thing that actually competed with the DARPANET. And they paid a bunch of money in order to get included in textbooks and they really got a bunch of funding behind them and stuff. Here's how the internet actually works is that TCP IP works like this. You can think about it as an hourglass of that. The thing that TCP IP cares about is that there's an IP layer connection at the middle, but at the bottom, it's an inter-networking protocol. That network can be whatever you want on the bottom. And then as long as it goes through that hourglass middle of the IP layer, it can be whatever you want at the top. And that's the way we built this thing. It's not this clean model of everything goes down, everything goes across, everything goes up here. The reason why we built it this way is because we want you to be flexible of doing the bottom and the top, right? And so kind of a mental model that I like to think of this for is that in terms of that hourglass, right? Lightning is that layer in the middle. Of that lightning, you can do an instant bearer instrument final settlement between moving through different states with Bitcoin, right? And so where does Fedimint come into here, right? So Fedimint is a way that you can scale Bitcoin on the base layer, but make it interoperable with Lightning, right? And so what happens when you set up a Fedimint is that we knew with Chaumy and eCash in like the 80s when David Chaum first came up with this stuff, that this was like basically cryptographically, this is like perfect privacy. Like there is really no better way than using this blinded signature scheme that David Chaum came up with. But the problem is that the way that it works is you deposit to the mint, and then when you do a withdraw, it's completely uncorrelated. You have very good privacy. But the problem is you're trusting the mint. And so the point of Fedimint is what if we can take this blinded signature scheme and we can apply it on top of Bitcoin, but take that centralized mint guy and we can decentralize that dude, right? So federated Chaumian eCash mint. And so now what we're doing is we're applying this, like, remember what I was saying of like, hey, we've got the different layers like this of that. It's got the lightning in the middle, right?
Yeah, I'm a bottom and I have a muffin top, so I really get that analogy.
Is that so we can use Fedimint of that, hey, we're going to deposit into the mint, and then the kind of top layer for it is the thing you're holding is an eCash note, which is a claim against a deposit in the mint. But because it's interoperable with Lightning, right? This is how it becomes that you can still like scale out Bitcoin as you're doing this. Is that the thing that you're doing is you're basically paying Lightning invoices all the time with Fedimint, right? This is like the big unlock for it. Is that, but at rest, what you're holding is eCash notes, and at rest, what's happening is there's an on-chain deposit. But because it's interoperable with Lightning, that's how you can make it interoperable with the rest of the systems. When you talk about Liquid, those sorts of things, Liquid isn't like a direct competitor to Fedimint or whatever, right? It's just a different set of trade-offs, right? But because Liquid is also compatible with Lightning, and because like using trampolines or just using stuff like bolts or whatever it is, right? Like you can do swaps.
Remember, this is for non-technical. Go.
Okay.
Should I try from a different angle?
Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear, and then I'll try from a different angle after that.
And let's just keep trying it.
Keep hammering away.
All of us. Let's keep hammering. So there's a lot of things. First of all, Blockstream, incredible company, and really important to note that they were actually the first ever company to see the potential of Fedimint. They were the first sponsor for Fedimint. Eric, when he was working by himself, they sponsored the project so they could see the potential. So it's really important to understand that, and they continue to support it. So that's the first thing that I wanted to make sure it's really clear. But why were they excited about it? Because they could see its full potential. Now, before I go into the details of that, I think we should think of an analogy. So there's the analogy of the internet, but I'm going to take it past to the analogy of just how the normal world works. Right now, we have people, and we have billions of people on the planet, and they're distributed worldwide, and they need to move around and so on. That requires ability to scale. Now, how have we as humankind decided that we're going to scale? Did we does everybody have their own house with their own private road to everybody else in the world? No, that doesn't scale. On the other hand, does everybody live in the same city in the entire world, 8 billion people? No, that doesn't scale. What we found scaling is humans are the base assets, of humans, and they're on the earth, and so that's the base, that's the foundation that we're on, the earth and people. We live in cities where most economic density happens, not all, but most, and then we are connected together by this transport network of motorways and air flight paths and shipping lanes. Yeah, that scales. The same thing happens when we go to the internet. The basic unit of transfer is the packet of information, a data packet. Yep, and that's and the foundation is wires and cables and these packets of data. They are congregate in websites. So these are where we have most economic density, and they're connected together by the internet, connecting those together. So now let's take this to when we're dealing with value. The base asset here is Bitcoin. And we have this mechanism to send value we have the road network, Lightning. But we were saying, well, every single person who's using this is going to have if we just decided that we're going to only use the Lightning network, it will be the equivalent of everybody having their own private road. And if you did that, you could see just conceptually, the world would be all road, and it wouldn't really be very practical. But on the other hand, you have these ideas of these monolithic layer twos. You see them on Ethereum and so on, these layer 2 roll-ups and so on. These monolithic, where the idea is everyone who's using the base layer, if they want to do anything beyond the basics of the core decentralized base layer, the expectation is that everyone in the world will use this one layer 2. That's the equivalent of everybody in the world living in the same city, which again, we could just think about it. It would be this sort of it just doesn't look like it would scale. So what you want to do is to have the combination. You want to have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of cities where the economic density happens connected by roads, that scales, or tens of thousands of websites connected by the internet, that scales. So what is this thing where you can do perform actions, maintain some privacy, custody, and also scale, have internal transactions, you have streets and lanes and so on, and have extra functionality. You have the dentists and the doctors and the shops. Within a Fedimint, you can add any functionality you want to have. So Fedimints are the cities. The Lightning Network is the road and transport connection that connects it. And Bitcoin is the earth, the foundation that they're all built on top of. That scales to billions of users. And so that's conceptually how you should see Fedimint fitting into it. It's not just a mechanism for Xiaomi and eCash. Xiaomi and eCash and Bitcoin and Lightning connection were the first apps. Just like when I had, you have your iPhone, it's running an operating system. And an operating system stores data, allows you to access data, and it runs applications. Fedimints allow you to store data, access that data, and run applications on top of it. But if you ask the average person what an operating system is, how does it work, most of them won't be able to answer that question, even though they use it every day. But if you ask them, what can I do with iOS or Android, they'll be able to wax lyrical. I can use Facebook. I can maybe, up until last week, I could use Twitter, maybe not anymore. I can use Nost. I can do these different things with it, You can do the same with a Fedimint, but one big difference. Unlike any other operating system out there, there is no single point of trust, because we federated. So we can do anything that you can do on your iPhone or your desktop or website, but without relying on one computer, one mobile, one company. And so we are federated, i.e. we can take the operating system and federate it. And we can have, just like there are millions of computers, millions of websites, there can be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of federations, all connected seamlessly by the Lightning Network. I can show you, can I show you actually something on the screen very briefly?
Yeah.
Let me just show you. Here's one I made earlier. Oh, no, you have to upload files. Okay.
You can do present on the bottom. You just hit present and it'll share your screen.
Oh, share screen. I missed that option. There was a big share screen button that I missed. There you go. Let's see. There we go. Very briefly, this is a federation. Fedimint allows you to build federations.
I can't see it. Oh, there it is. I have to add it. There we go.
Okay. There you go. So Fedimint is this open source protocol, just like Bitcoin and Lightning, but whereas Bitcoin focuses being this base money, Lightning focuses allowing you to move that money around from one place to another at low cost and high speed. Federations allow you to run any application or custody any money or data in a manner without any single party of trust. Okay, so it's a federated operating system, whereas Lightning is this value network, and Bitcoin is the base value that you're holding.
Oh, this is amazing.
So each federation allows you to create, and there's going to be hundreds of thousands of these, but it allows you to create a community-run federation. It handles custody, and it's run by trusted members of your community. Each community, there could be a family of 4. It could be a group of friends. It could be a village. It could be a church. It could be a company, or it could be a charity, or an activist group, or anything in between. Decides in the way they already decide things. We're not going to teach communities how to make decisions to people they can trust from that community to run the federation, but it's incredibly easy to run. Now, on top of custody, it also, because of the apps that come as standard with it, eCash, Lightning, and Bitcoin, it provides privacy, scalability, and extensibility. The Fedimint protocol itself can be extended with other apps. You don't have to just start with, you don't have to just continue with the apps that come as standard. And it's all run on behalf of that given community. So the idea is, if I'm a user Fedi or any other Fedimint capable wallet. So in time, there'll be multiple, just say the multiple Bitcoin wallets, multiple Lightning wallets. We're the first Fedimint wallet, but there will be others. But as a user of your wallet, effectively, you can connect to multiple federations. Just like I can connect with my web browser to multiple websites, I can connect to multiple federations, and I can decide on each one. It's like multiple computers, each one, what money, what data, and what aspects of my digital life, i.e. what applications I run on each one. Yes? And conversely, each federation can serve anywhere between 5 to 10 to 10,000, 100,000 users, depending on the size of the community that they're servicing. So when you take that together, you're going to have, ultimately, end game is hundreds of thousands of federations. Think about that, and hundreds of thousands of these sort of digital cities connected, servicing hundreds of millions, if not billions of users, all seamlessly connected to each other via the Lightning Network, and all running on top of the Bitcoin network. That is how you should think about it. And that's why it makes, in combination, it's this global, decentralized, federated OS network. So it isn't just one layer one that we have to all put a layer two that everybody in the world, 8 billion people are expected to put their trust in. And if there's a bug, 8 billion people are affected, you'll have a million of these, and each one chosen by their own community to decide their own mini liquid. But it's not just liquid, it can run any application that you want, and you remove the things that you want. Just like on your own computer, I choose the applications I run. Even though we're all running iPhone or all running Android, if you took 2 different people, they'll have a different set of applications running. Does that help set the picture for you?
Dude, that is freaking incredible. Like that's,
okay.
I've been in Bitcoin since 2011 as well, and I can't think of anything that's as exciting to me as this. Like that presentation that you just gave, like
Bitcoin wins in 2023. I've been saying this since 2020, and I restated it at the beginning. I stated it. It was my pinned. I don't tweet much, but I had a pinned tweet since 2020, and I said it wins in 2023. And at the end of last year, I reconfirmed it. But this was with the added knowledge of what was coming down the pipe with Fedimint, with Fedi, with Lightning, with Noster. Anything that we want to be able to do, we can do today, right now, better, faster, more easily than in any other approach, without any single point of trust. That is what, and the future is here. It's just not, but with events like this and with live streams like this, more and more people will start to see it. But the best way to see it is by just people just using the application. And that's what we're excited to get people to use it.
When can we try it? When can we use it? That's the question I have now. Like, how can I set up one of these for my, like, my group of friends or whatever that I want to help my family get onto Bitcoin? Some of them are like, they want $50 a Bitcoin. They want $100 a Bitcoin. They're just dipping their toes in. They don't need to worry about buying hardware wallets and getting seed phrases and all that. They just want to I want some Bitcoin. So if there was this easy way for me to just come join my federation or whatever, here's some Bitcoin on our, XYZ mint or whatever, where it's multi-custody or whatever.
So we have Fedi and Fediment's obviously in constant development, but as of a couple of months ago, we did a couple of things. One, we launched Fedi Alpha. So this is a version, but it's targeted at builders. So if you're technical, probably not the examples you gave right now, but if you're a builder, you can start using that right now and playing around with it.
Cool.
If you're a more technical community, you could start running federations right now, and you can use that right now and start doing things. And so
there's Fedimint, but then there's Chaumy and eCash. And I think from the perspective of normal people, and even people like myself, I didn't really grasp the importance of Fedimint and what Chaumy and eCash is going to be for Bitcoin until about 2 months ago.
No,
So
neither did I to begin with, because Fedimint is a protocol, is a federated operator. It can run any application in a way where there's no single point of trust. However, it comes as standard. You can see it on here. This is the code, but it comes as standard with free apps. It's a bit like when you get your iPhone, there's some built-in apps as standard. You get the phone, you get the text messaging app, and you get your calendar app, for
okay,
example.
so it's like the Federation OS.
So the Fedimint is this federated OS, but it comes as standard, and it handles all the process of making sure that if there's a bad actor amongst the guardians, that it switches over, or if a guardian's machine fails and then they restart, it automatically reconnects. It handles all of that for you. Now, if you've got this powerful system that can run applications in this federated manner, what applications are you going to want to run? Well, the sky is the limit, but what ones should be the default apps?
Bitcoin.
And the default apps, Bitcoin is the first one. The second one that's installed is eCash, because eCash is an incredibly powerful protocol. It gives you so many things in one. It gives you privacy, but it also gives you, it's a bearer instrument. You can send it to someone else directly, peer to peer.
So that's the thing that I was talking about.
You can instant message people money. And it also gives you a level of scalability because you can do it peer to peer. It provides you scalability of Lightning. So you might as well include that. And also you want to connect to the road, the traffic, the transport system. So that's Lightning as well, so that you can connect to the rest of the Lightning system.
Okay, wait.
So those three come as standard.
Okay, so back it up a smidge, because that's what I was kind of excited about before, but I was disconnecting the operating system software model that you guys are building, the software for people to manage mints and add applications to their mints, etc. But the real exciting thing that's going to take Bitcoin to the next level of global adoption is the eCash, unlocking eCash for Bitcoin.
I would say it's both, because you want to be able to.
You guys are building it, right?
Yeah, no, but you want eCash, but you also want an execution environment, because then that allows you to add any application you want. We have people approaching us with so many different ideas, but like an actual a dispute resolution service, or a federated pension annuities service. Right. eCash alone won't do that. That might be the thing you move around, but you need to be able to add the actual business logic. For any business idea that you can think of, you need an ability to program it. And so Fedimint allows you to provide that execution environment. Anything that you can run on an operating system, all of the apps that are running on the App Store and on websites and so on, that's what Fedimint gives you. But if you're thinking about this decentralized future, we're not going to fund that via everybody watching adverts. It's going to be funded by value being transferred around and you paying for usage of a service. And to do that at scale, you need Lightning, you need Bitcoin, you need eCash. So that's why they're the default apps, because any other service you provide is likely going to be charged for via some. You're going to have value for value. Is how you scale to the world, including AI. AI, they're already seeing this. They've started off offering for free. The machines back in December started to fail, so they started charging money for it. And you see, OpenAI is now a premium service. But the problem is, if you're starting asking for credit cards and so on, and you want to have a product that everyone in the world will want, it's just having worked for an e-commerce company with millions of users, trying to be able to offer credit card payments. First of all, you're going to eliminate billions of users who just won't be able to access that, and then you're going to have to set up credit card relationships in dozens of countries. Or I can just offer Bitcoin. I mean, it's going to be a no-brainer. Whether they realize it or not, they will have to go to something that's available 24 hours a day, anywhere in the world, that everybody understands. And that's only one asset that does that, that's Bitcoin.
Yeah, and there's a couple key properties for that one too, right? Is that, like you're saying that, hey, there's going to be millions of users, but also there's going to be millions of AI agents, right? And so this is like the big one that like I'm seeing like a lot of people, like when that kind of clicks for them on the AI side, is that, you're going to spin up this agent. It's going to exist for 72 seconds, right? And like in order for it to make an economic transaction, either you have to pass along your credit card information to that thing, Or what you can do is you can give it some Bitcoin as a bearer instrument that it can use during those 72 seconds that it exists, right? And so like that's like another kind of cool thing for that. And so yeah, this is just like kind of a side thing also for arriving at the Federation. It's just how kind of I arrived at it in terms of like, and like you first see it and like you don't really see it, is that you start from like, oh hey, this is just custodying Bitcoin, right? And a mechanism for scaling custody of Bitcoin. And that's kind of like Eric's original thoughts when he was thinking about Fedimint, right? Was that this is just a way to scale custody of Bitcoin. But then you think about what does it mean to actually own Bitcoin, right? To own Bitcoin is to know how to spend it. It's to know the information required for you to spend the Bitcoin, right? So like he who owns Bitcoin, the way that you prove it is that you sign a message with the private key associated with the public key that Bitcoin is locked to, right? Or the hash of the public key that Bitcoin's locked to. And so to own Bitcoin is to control that data. So basically the consensus mechanism for custodying Bitcoin is just custodying data, right? And so if you're creating this distributed consensus mechanism for organizing and updating and custodying data, well, you can use that same thing for doing it with other sorts of data, right? And so this is one of the really cool things that we did. There's like one of the first Fedimint modules that was outside of the default modules was that this was last year at Bitcoin++. This was like how I first started interacting with Justin, was we built a simplicity module. So simplicity is the smart contracting language that Blockstream has been developing for years. And this was the first application of it where you could actually use it. And the reason why was because the way that Fedimint's consensus works is that there's inputs, outputs, and a signature. And so on one side, you can have Bitcoin. On the other side, on the inputs, you can have Bitcoin. On the outputs side, you could have eCash. On the inputs, you could have eCash. On the outputs, you have Lightning. On the inputs, you could have Bitcoin. On the outputs, you could have execution of a Simplicity smart contract.
Cool.
Right? On the inputs, you could have the Simplicity smart contract executing. And on the outputs, you could have, like a hedging mechanism established for locking in the price of Bitcoin to a certain dollar value.
Pay me this money and I'll run this application, or I run this application and it needs to pay money to something else, which could be another application, which then needs to. So it's the, well, you might get onto the L402, but the history between the 402 protocol and the internet.
Before we go there, though, I just kind of back it up again a little bit. I like to back it up. Gotta exercise a little bit. So even explaining this to other Bitcoiners is difficult, and I feel like I have a better grasp of it than most random, like just generally aware Bitcoiners, because Fedimint is so new and so groundbreaking in my opinion that it's like people don't get it. Anyways, irrelevant.
If I could do like a one for specific Bitcoiners, right? Of like how to
hold on, let me do it, because I gotta be explaining it, right? So you gotta let me do it, and then you tell me if I'm wrong. So because people ask me all the time, why do you like Fedimint, or why do you like eCash, whatever it is. And I try to explain it, and I kind of explained it like with all that verbal diarrhea I gave you earlier. But it's separating it from and trying to think about it from the perspective of average regular people who don't really, they get inundated all the time by crypto this, blockchain that. They don't get Lightning even. So to me, it's like people that are in crypto, and there's 300 million people that came into the bubble the last year, and they came in through the funnel of crypto. So they're used to blockchains. They're used to, everything scales on Solana and everything scales on BSC and Ethereum layer 2s. Like that's how we're going to scale crypto. Bitcoin's slow boomer coin. It can't do smart contracts, blah, blah, blah. So everybody's got this like really miss kind of like, whatever, it's a bias that they have that like a blockchain is going to do this stuff. So to me, it's like there's, like I said earlier, there's your savings, your base layer Bitcoin that you're going to want to have in like multi-sig that you're going to own yourself. It's your own house, in your analogy. You've got the house, and you may then build a road to some other city. You got your citadel, which is your hoard of Bitcoin, your one Bitcoin.
You have your private country mansion with its own shark-based moat around it and so on. Yeah, but
and
not
then you
everybody
build a
can
road.
afford to have. But unfortunately, not everybody can afford to have their own mansion with a
Yeah,
private road
exactly.
and guards. But if you can, definitely do it. Everybody would
But you're
love to
gonna,
have
yeah,
that.
you're not gonna like
But
put
but most people live
your
in cities.
yeah, you wouldn't build your mansion on top of somebody else's house, right? You'd build it on your own piece of land somewhere away from everybody, and then you're gonna have your own
Yeah.
guard around it.
And if you can do that, you should definitely do it. It's like the
Yeah.
dream. But the
But then
reality
if you're
is at scale, most people won't be doing that,
right,
unfortunately. But but
so
the people who
that's
can, they
not,
should definitely
you
do
know,
it.
that's not scalable to everybody. Like there's only 21 million Bitcoin, as the adage goes. There's 46 million millionaires, only 21 million Bitcoin. You do the math. Obviously that's what we kind of think, like Bitcoin, not everybody's going to be able to own one Bitcoin. It's just, that's the truth. But everybody's going to be able to use Bitcoin. And as Bitcoin goes to $10 million per coin in the future or higher, whatever, 100 trillion market cap, as everything else gets demonetized, like the monetary premium leaks out of real estate and the bond market and everything, and Bitcoin absorbs monetary premium for the world, whether it takes 5 decades or 100 years or whatever. We all believe that, like, eventually that's where the things are trending. Bitcoin is going to grow and grow and grow in appreciation of the total value of monetary premium in the world. And we're not going to be able to use base layer Bitcoin for all of that. We're not going to be able to use base layer Bitcoin for 10% of that. So that's when, then we have the Lightning Network, which is a settlement layer that will be, I guess, we used to think of it as that's what's going to scale for payments for the world. The Lightning Network will scale for everybody to be able to make coffee payments. But now it's like, look at what happened to Ethereum and Solana and all these blockchains when they even got like 5 million users gambling on Ponzi schemes last year, 2 years ago. They all blew up. Like the fees went absurd and the things like shut down. Sometimes all these layer 2s on Ethereum were shutting down. Consensus started failing on Solana and stuff. So blockchains just don't really scale for billions of people. And so, like, the idea that we're going to take the Chaumian eCash model for Bitcoin, which makes sense if you really kind of think about it, and in the analogy that you guys said earlier, where it's just data. So if you somehow can get Bitcoin into being just data that you send around through the internet, through whatever communication method, can you talk about how, because there's purists in crypto, like in the conversations, like, oh, well, that's not completely decentralized. I thought you were a Bitcoin maxi. I thought you liked decentralization. Chaumian eCash is not as trustless as base layer Bitcoin. What do you say to people who say that stuff? And how do you get Bitcoiners who are kind of like, Bitcoiners are, like I said earlier, there's PTSD from the block size debates. There's PTSD from Bitcoin versus crypto debates, Ethereum versus Bitcoin debates. They're somewhat centralized and they have like, things where they do all the time where they change the consensus, or they do a random gas limit increase, which is more centralized, or the EIP 1559 to change it to deflationary. People are allergic to centralization in the conversation, because if you want to remain intellectually consistent in Bitcoin maximalism, or in just Bitcoin as the best money, you kind of emphasize and prioritize the whole decentralization side of it. So how do you think about the eCash?
I completely agree. But I guess my view is decentralization is key. And given that if you do the numbers at global scale with 8 billion humans and another 10 to 20 billion AIs, agents, you just do the numbers, you realize that even with Bitcoin, even with Lightning, you need something else first. That's the first statement on it. You need to
because
just
of block size, you mean?
unless we want to start making changes to the fundamental core, which is Bitcoin, which then puts us at a number of risks and I don't expect that to happen if it's fundamental consensus changes like that in terms of the total issuance of Bitcoin, and block size may increase, but not for a very, very long time, etc. We have to have an assumption. And also, if you really want to be practical, you need to not assume that you cannot achieve, you want to work with what you've got. And so basically what we've got, you will need to scale beyond Bitcoin and Lightning. That I don't think there's many people who don't disagree with that now. So that's the first step. The second step, I think, is to just get people to use the solutions that are coming out and to see what the experience is like. And this is, but that wasn't the question you asked. But I think I would like to come back to that. And the third is to realize that in this future that we're saying here, you're as decentralized as you're maximally decentralized. We're talking about not one monolithic layer 2, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of them, all run by their own communities, and anyone at any point could create another. So if you didn't like any of the communities that were running federations that then you could create your own one. It could be a community of 3 or 4 people, you and your friends and family. And if that wasn't good enough, then you should and you could continue to self-custody. It isn't an either or, but it's just a realization that we already have communities. They're already there. We trust each other in those. We can utilize that existing superpower of collaboration and supercharge. And Fedimint is a technology that allows you to take your existing ability to collaborate and supercharge that. But the end state is highly decentralized if you think about it. Versus the alternative of 5 different exchanges with everybody in the world using, which is where we would be going towards if you don't have something like Fedimint. Or because we know that we can't have everybody having their own on-chain Bitcoin wallet or even their own Lightning wallet directly, then the alternative without something like Fedimint, as opposed to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of federations, is 5 or 4 exchanges with 95% of the people in the world using, which that's not great.
Do you think that like the exchanges will adopt this eCash model, and instead of having like centralized custodial Bitcoin that they're holding in cold storage, that they may actually just use federated eCash? Like, would they become?
There becomes incentives for it. So this is like a couple things for this one, right? So remember we were talking before of that, like the way that the internet sort of works is that you've got this waste layer where everything collapses to IP, but it's moving between separate networks, right? It's not the exact same network underneath. Like we've got all these different regions, different domains, different things, but they all communicate and you can pass along the packets.
To be honest, Kody, I didn't really get that analogy. I just didn't say anything because I don't want to look dumb. But like, can you expand on that? Because I like the analogy. I just don't get how the connection to IP works.
So it's very important because Lightning is IP, right? Which is that like.
No, I mean in the current internet. In the current internet is like, let's say you're in in China or Russia and the internet's balkanized, right? There's like separate internets right now. Do they all connect in the middle through IP? Is that what you're saying?
The way that they communicate is it collapses down or it like builds up to IP, specifically being compatible with that communication layer. And if you can do that, then I can take something that's like, I've got my like intranet at my company or whatever, right? And then when I want to get something outside of my intranet, I build it to IP, I pass it through IP, and then it goes out wherever it was going, right?
Is that, you mean IP addresses or?
Yeah, so internet protocol.
Dumb question, but.
So an IP address.
No, it's not a dumb question, by the way.
Yeah, so this is the thing that Lightning ends up serving as, right? Is that the communication layer.
Is there an alternative to IP addresses or IP that's just kind of not used, that isn't winning, or that is balkanized or something?
Well, what we said before, right, about the OSI model, right? The way that wanted to work was not using IP as that communication layer. It wanted everything to collapse all the way down, and at the base layer, everything is exactly the same, and everyone's using exactly the same things. But the way that the internet works is you don't have to locally, what you're doing internally, be compatible with what everyone else is doing internally. It's just when you communicate with those people, you have to use this same communication mechanism between the two. But once I get over to you, you can do whatever you want on your side, right? So the reason why I like this analogy for it is because within Fedimint, right? This is like the problem with like Chami eCash mints at the beginning, is that the eCash is only interoperable with the mint. I can only use it with other people using the same mint that I'm using. And so that's not very useful. But because Fedimint is interoperable with Lightning through this Lightning gateway system, so it doesn't matter that I'm using this eCash system internally, right? Because the experience that I have is that every time I scan a Lightning invoice, I can make the payment because I'm interoperable with it.
which is the way the internet works,
Right.
and which is the way humankind works. If you had, imagine you had a city and it had no roads, and it was just thick forest, impenetrable forest, no roads, no planes, no ships. I wouldn't say it's not useful, because within your city you can still get a lot of stuff done, but without connection to the rest of the world, the things you can do are a tiny fraction of the things you can do if you can connect with the rest of the world and connect to other cities. So IP, in an example that Kody was saying, is this standard, this protocol to be able to send data from one silo to another. Because when you look at the internet, you say, look, the internet's decentralized and maybe balkanized and so on, but it's this decentralized protocol that allows anybody to talk to anybody. But when you're connecting with your own mobile phone to the internet or your own home computer, you have a hosting provider, an internet service provider. I don't know who your one would be, but there will be some company that you're paying every month to have access to the internet. And that company's, when you connect to them, their computers are not part of the direct internet. They are effectively an equivalent of a Fedimint. They have their own proprietary internet provided for all of their users, and then that's connected via the IP protocol to every other internet service provider's proprietary mini internet.
Interesting. Okay.
That's how the internet works, where you don't have a direct connection to the internet. You connect up to this company, and then they take all of those connections and connect up to the internet. Now you might think, well, then I'm locked into them, but you're not, because you can connect up to multiple ISPs, and you do with your mobile phone. Your telecoms company is an ISP. With your desktop, you're using a different ISP, and if you wanted to, you could sign contracts with 3 or 4 ISPs, and you can buy a Wi-Fi router which can actually have connections to multiple different. And many companies do that. They will have connections to satellite internet plus cable internet plus normal phone internet, and their mobile phones for everybody is using a different.
Okay, question.
Yeah?
I get it. I'm getting it better now. The analogies. If, let's say, I start a Ontario, Canada Federation, whatever, right? I've got a federation. It's me and Greg Foss and, a couple other Bitcoiners, and we've got a Foss Cash, whatever tokens. It's Bitcoin, because our mint is not fractionally reserved. It's 100%, fully backed by each eCash token is fully backed to Bitcoin, and I imagine you have tools to prove that there's no fractional reserve happening in the mint. So it's a fully backed private mint that has Bitcoin in, on the base layer, some on the Lightning Network, and we've got these eCash tokens that represent the Bitcoin that's in the mint. That's kind of like a rough way that the eCash works. So it's not like
there's a point there. There's a point there I want to clarify. One of the trade-offs, because it was important to be clear about those, is that it's difficult to be able to verify that it's full reserve. And that's why it's important that the people that are the guardians are people that are trusted by the community. Because no single guardian could inflate supply, but if they worked together, it would theoretically be, and they were technical as well, it will be theoretically possible for them to be able to do that. Now, there are ways in which we can do audits, proof of reserves audits, say on a once a 6 month basis or once a year basis, so you would know after the fact if that's happened. But it's difficult operationally to do that sort of on the fly on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and that's a specific thing in terms of the trade-offs that you can do when doing this, and that someone might want to unplug the eCash module as it exists today and plug in their own eCash module that is like kind of moving more toward that auditability aspect, right? Because the set of trade-offs that we're doing right now, right, is that this is a classical Contramian eCash, right? Of that, like, this is privacy, this is like cryptographically perfect privacy. Basically, the thing that you have to do in order to get that level of auditability that you're saying there is you basically have to roll the keys, and you have to introduce some attack vectors that would kind of
but
attack the privacy
we
aspect.
can go into the but it's possible. But the way the default set of apps, eCash, has incredible properties. It's a bearer instrument. You can send it, you can instant message it, and it provides cryptographic perfect privacy. But the trade-off is perfect privacy implies hard to audit. By definition. Yeah.
So in that situation, me and Greg Foss have this mint going. I get my my barber in my mint. He wants some Bitcoin. What does that look like for somebody who wants to buy Bitcoin in my mint? How is that, like, is it that we sell him our Bitcoin from the mint, or is it like, are we really creating like community banks or credit unions or something? Is that, how do you guys see that happening, where people are wanting to come to a mint to buy their Bitcoin, or they're getting eCash tokens from a friend or something like that? Like my barber comes in, I give him some of my Bitcoin that I have in the mint.
So yeah, there's many different questions in that sub question, but the question of how does someone acquire their Bitcoin, which is I think a big part of the sort of sub questions you asked there, is they would acquire it. This is a place where they custody, they hold their eCash and potentially hold Bitcoin. And it's also where they do things. They process it in some way. For example, as I say, using it for the purposes of pensions or annuities or whatever, or paying for things, etc. But how you acquire it, it's however they wish to acquire it. That's sort of outside the scope of the system. Someone could build services to allow them to do that, but they could right now. In general, though, the free legal ways people acquire Bitcoin are they buy it from someone or some service, they receive it as a gift from someone, or they earn it. So they will acquire their Bitcoin in one of those free ways. And that's it. I mean, it's no rocket science. They can still do that here. Someone else in the mint may choose to send them as a gift, or because they provided them a good or service, or they could choose to, on a peer-to-peer basis, buy it. That's up to them.
So somebody was asking me this question the other day because I was shilling how excited I was about, like, if I think what Fedimint and all this is going to be. I really do think it's going to be one of the biggest like network effects for Bitcoin in a long time, to unlock a lot of people to come on into Bitcoin. But they were like, I was thinking about it from the perspective of like that, where I feel like I'm going around thinking about like gold, what a culturally relevant, significant thing gold is in countries like India and all over the world. Religious, groups have temples, and even on a smaller scale, you look at things like the local Kiwanis Club, or the local Optimist Club that goes out into the community and builds a rink for the kids, or Lions clubs where the old guys are going for breakfast and running fundraisers for the communities. Like, I'm thinking, like, how does Bitcoin get to that culturally significant, culturally relevant place in society? How long is it going to take before people value Bitcoin as a gift for a wedding dowry, like they do with diamonds or gold or whatever? Culturally, it's going to take a long time, but I think Fedimint and things like Fedi are going to be instrumental in that process, because I feel like the Bitcoin meetup is going to evolve beyond just a social club where people come talk about Bitcoin. It's going to actually become more like, at first, the local, Kiwanis thing, where people are showing up in their community, doing fundraisers, promoting the values of sovereignty and local farming initiatives and childhood education, fitness, things that, there's no stereotypical Bitcoiner, but there's a lot of things that we hold kind of similar in values. And like, as I see, like, the last 10 years of Bitcoin was a big story of Bitcoin meetups and people getting together and doing things. Now it seems to me like that we need to be pushed forward. We need to push it forward towards a federation or an affiliation of some sort of global group of not centralized, but just, you know, people where there's like a list of best practices that you can provide services in your local community and show up in the local community. And I think like people like me would totally be into doing that or joining.
So first of all, sort of crystal ball gazing as to when Bitcoin will have the same level of status in society as gold. I can answer in two ways. One, I can't really know, but the other way, I can tell you right now that the answer is today for certain communities already. If the people are not on this call, it's already at that status, if not beyond. But it's a small set of communities. But the other thing that the more general point that you're saying, I would say that as human beings, we have three superpowers in terms of how we can progress and we can move society forward. One is the superpower of self-improvement, our desire to self-actualization. You know, people like yourself or Kody are exemplars of this, who try to strive every day to be better and better and better, you know. Vel primus, vel comprimus, either the best or among the best, you know. And that's a superpower. Now, in Bitcoin terms, that's typified by self-custody, learning how to be self-sovereign, self-custody, run your own Lightning node, run your own Bitcoin node, etc. And that takes us forward in society, and it will take us forward with what we're doing. Then the other is the superpower of competition, competing companies, competing organizations working, and you have winners and losers and so on. That has driven forward society, and we've seen that in terms of capitalism, etc., and competition between organizations. And we see that in the Bitcoin space by companies, capitalist commercial companies competing to provide services to users. But there's one other superpower that drives society forward as well, which is our ability to form complex society, to collaborate, to cooperate. It's not the same as competition, and it's not the same as doing everything yourself, but it's also been vital to driving forward society, humanity as well. We see it in family, in community, in cooperation, and so on. And up until Fedimint, there hasn't been a technology to take that human desire and to level it up and empower it and supercharge it. That's what Fedimint does. So now we have technologies out there that allow us to supercharge our desire to compete, to supercharge our desires to self-improve, and to supercharge our desires to collaborate. When you combine that, there is nothing we cannot do today, right now. And so, yes, community, leveling up, empowering communities everywhere is going to be, I think, and we all think, really, really key to driving forward that adoption from whenever it was going to be to way sooner. But we don't know when, but I don't want to wait 20, 30 years. I always say I want it to be happening in 2-3 years, not 20, 30 years. And I think this piece, combined with Lightning, combined with Bitcoin, combined with other freedom technologies like Nostr and everything else, we can do this right now.
Yeah,
Awesome. Kody,
if I can jump in, just because I think just sort of like setting the table for this one of that kind of like how we arrive at federations, right? Because I think we kind of like skipped over this. So like federations are useful, right? But like just sort of if I'm like somebody who's like wants to custody Bitcoin or wants to like become sovereign in these ways, right? Like how do I sort of arrive at a federation as a way to do that, right? So like I think Obi has the most experience with this in terms of like when onboarding people into Bitcoin is that normally they just kind of go third party, right? Is that most of the people coming on, like when people bring up all these metrics of like more and more people are bringing into crypto and Bitcoin, like mostly what they're talking about is they're onboarding into the third party services, right? And so, like I listen to the Swan Signal podcast, I listen to Marty Bent, I listen to like everybody. I know that I need to take custody of my Bitcoin. So I say, okay, I'm going to move off of third party and I'm going to go first party. Okay. So I like move it into a wallet that I control. Well, now you get into this issue, right? Of that, what if I'm in an accident? What if something happens to me specifically, right? I'm the guy who took custody of this thing. It exists on my phone, okay, I'll make a backup. I'll take the backup. I'll put it in on a steel plate or something, right? Well, now anybody who owns the steel plate owns my Bitcoin as much as I do, right?
Right.
So what's the sort of what's the Bitcoin standard of the best way that we should be doing custody? well, we should be doing a threshold multi-sig backup, right? Is that so if something happens to me, then my family can still recover the Bitcoin and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But now every single person is facing exactly this problem. And so how do we solve this problem of that? Should I roll a special threshold multi-sig solution for backing up the Bitcoin for me? Should I roll another one for my mom? Should I roll another one for my wife? Should I roll another one for my friends, right? Of where I'm going to be like a part of that threshold custody system for every single
and they'll all be a part of it for everybody else as well.
Exactly, right? Is that no, let's leverage the fact that we already have these high trust communities, these high trust little circles that we've set up, right? Let's leverage that fact in order to make a like very, very, very good in terms of its Byzantine fault tolerant. It's using like cutting edge cryptography and the stuff that's like really, really established and works and has been audited and all these sorts of things in order to make sure that we have the best sort of threshold custody mechanism for all of them. That's where you arrive at like a federation of that.
Love it.
We're going to set this up. But now you run into this issue. And I think this is a lot of the issues that people have when they try to do something like a hosted threshold custody mechanism, right? So like my lawyer has one, a company has one, my wife has one, my mom has one, and I have one or whatever, right? Well, now every time I want to do a spend, well, I have to like go call my lawyer and call my wife, right? Or I have to do whatever. Is that now I'm using this threshold custody mechanism. What's really, really cool about the eCash is because it's based off a reserve, which is this threshold custody mechanism, you have this unbelievable security at the base layer for this one, right? The eCash claim that the thing that you're actually using day to day, that's a single sig that just exists on your phone, or it exists on wherever you're using Fedi, right? So the day-to-day experience is that I get the convenience of using something like a wallet of Satoshi, right? Because it's just a single sig. I'm just scanning the invoice and clicking pay, right? But what happens if I lose my phone? Well, I have this federation that has this threshold backup mechanism, so I can go recover my funds through that one, right? And so that's sort of like, I think that was kind of like a missing piece of covering of like, why do we arrive at a federation and why do we arrive at Fedimint using eCash as a very good scaling solution for these is because everyone runs into this problem in terms of their custody.
Yeah.
So the solution that a lot of people do, like you can talk to Bitcoiners about it. It's like, why do most of them use Wallet of Satoshi or why do they use like any of these things where it's like a hosted solution for their single sig day-to-day spending? They're like, well, I have like self-custody of my coins, right? But like on a day-to-day spending cash thing, I don't have to go to my cold storage every single time, right? So it's easier for me to just use this third-party solution. Is that Fedimint plays in this area between first party and third party, where we can say, okay, well, you can have the day-to-day experience of having a single sig, but you also have this threshold backup solution. And off of that threshold backup solution using the Fedimint module system, you can extend that to other things, right? So you can do the same thing with your password manager. You can do the same thing with you can do, because you have like the kind of larger liquidity base of Fedimint, you can do something like stability pools where you can lock in the price of Bitcoin to $1 or something.
Are you suggesting that you think the way that it'll roll out to Bitcoiners is that somebody that may have been previously like using Casa to secure their generational sort of wealth Bitcoin, their long-term storage Bitcoin, will instead maybe roll that into now creating a federation with other people?
No, I don't. Well, some might do, but I don't think that's the way. I think you've got third-party custody. Also, I would say, AKA stranger custody. You're giving it to a stranger. Sometimes a curly head guy in the Bahamas, and it doesn't end well, as we've seen. And then you've got on the other extreme, first-party, do-it-yourself custody, which is you're doing it all yourself. And then you've got this area in the middle, which is collaborative custody. Now, very close to, and actually it is really an equivalent of first-party custody with help, is support from a third party, but you still retain full control, is something like a CASA. That's on that extreme. And then but they've made it simpler, the experience simpler for you. It's on your mobile phone, it's easy, there's white glove support if you need it, but ultimately it's a multi-sig and you have full custody. Whereas with Fedi and Fedimint in the middle, it's collaborative custody where a community comes together and they're all having each other's back. And as opposed to a third party being the person to help you cover, the rest of the community or the most sort of knowledgeable people in the community cover you, and then you cover them, and so on. that's somewhere in the middle. But if you're already at the point where you're able to and you can afford to, because it's obviously more expensive to go that approach, but if you can afford to and you're able to self-custody, but you need a little bit of support, so you're willing to pay for that with Casa, then that is something you should definitely do. And if you can fully self-custody and set up your multi-sig without any third-party support at all, then you should go even further. You know? So
Right.
it's like a gamut,
like,
but you shouldn't go from there backwards, I guess.
Like I got a friend that like last year he wanted to get into Bitcoin. He's not wealthy. He has like $5,000 in savings or something like that. He bought $2,000 worth of Bitcoin, and I was encouraging him to get it off the exchange and just hold it in his own custody. I ended up having to just like be his, I'm going to keep a copy of your seed phrase guy, because he just was confused. He thought he was going to lose it.
You were his own mini Casa. His own personal Casa. Yeah.
That's like the perfect use case for something like a federation, right? Where he could just come into a trusted group of like me and some other friends that we've been in Bitcoin a while. They trust us. It's not a lot of money. We're probably not going to exit scam $2,000. So he can just,
and also you're his friend and family. He can do POP. There's like proof of work, you can have POP, proof of punch. He's family. You're gonna basically be ostracized from your community for the rest of your life, which is a cost to you. It's a social cost, which if you're a decent person, you value that social cost. So
you think that like that's a good use case for like how like local groups would use federations to onboard to Bitcoin rather than holding it in like a custodian? They would come into a kind of like a community bank or a credit union, a Bitcoin credit union.
So you can see, imagine all families will effectively set up multi-sigs between them, and instead of each, again, the main point, and I think Kody states this, but it's like we can work out where the ball is going or just follow the ball. And maybe this is a soccer or a football metaphor, but the ball is going all over the place, but it's going to end up at the goal. So let's just go over, make sure that it goes to the goal. So it's A to Z. Z point is billions of users, both human and robots. And when I mean robot, computers running AIs and so on, will be holding and transacting Bitcoin. Now they all need, those billions of users will all need to have the best, and they all deserve the best practice backup. So they all are going to set up multi-sigs, and they are all, wherever they are, including these AIs, multi-sigs, where they're all going to have backup processes for them and recovery processes for them. At some point, it makes sense to consolidate these and do them. Once you know that where it's ended up, and when you think about, well, we're going to need to be able to easily back up and recover. It's going to be multi-sig. We're going to need to be able to have access to it easily. That's Fedimint.
So let's say he wants to take out his $2,000. Let's say there's $100,000 in collaborative custody in my small town of like people that see me into Bitcoin. They want to get into Bitcoin. There's 10 people that are holding the keys. Somebody wants to take his $2,000 out. What is the process like he wants to, he's bought now $10,000 worth of Bitcoin over the year. He wants to take it into his own custody. How does that work?
Well, this is the image that we see with Fedi, right? And so if you use the app, you'll see this, that the whole point of it is that you can connect to multiple federations, right? And so just like you're saying there, right, is that there's a certain amount of wealth and data and privacy that he's comfortable with at that scale, the scale of your town. But there's a certain level where he's going to want to move out of there to something closer to himself, or maybe he's going to want to move it to something further away from himself. But the whole process of that is that over Fedi, this is the way that you would do this, is that you would click into your other federation, you would just move the funds there, and it would do it over Lightning.
Oh, really? Right? So you can go from one federation to another through the Lightning protocol, like you said, was the middle of the hourglass.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You can connect, and so Fedi, the thing that you're running on your phone, is effectively a control center where you can see, just like if you use Slack, you can see you can be a member of multiple Slack groups, or Discord, member of multiple Discord groups, or instant messaging client. You can be a member of multiple groups. You don't need a different computer for each group you're a member of. You see all the groups, and to go from one group to another is just clicking between the two of them. It's the same.
Right.
You can be a member of multiple federations. You choose which federations you decide to join. You decide what money, what data, and what aspects of your personal life applications you run on each one. And you have that control, and you can move the value between them.
So let's say, just in this situation, this guy gets completely orange pilled. He mortgages his house and puts $100,000 into Bitcoin. He's not comfortable being in any federation. He just wants his own like multi-sig. What's that
Then he
process?
sets his own up. Then he goes, then that's the process of setting up a multi-sig. Go to Casa, go to do it yourself, go to Bitcoin 10x security guide, figure out if he's quite technical, he can figure it all out himself. If he wants to be handheld, he can use services like Casa, like Unchained.
But I mean, like how does he get out of, because the $100,000?
He just goes, he clicks, he goes, opens up the federation, he clicks send, and scans the QR code and pays the Lightning invoice and sends.
But if it's like 100,000 or something, right? Isn't that?
Yeah, if it's 100,000,
then he'll pick sound and do an on-chain transaction.
Yeah, he'd want to do an on-chain transaction.
Experience will, the experience will be like using something like wallet of Satoshi in that respect.
So in that situation, though, would you have to get like all 10 of the signers, the people involved in setting up the federation?
But yes, you do. But this Fedimint is this automated system. So when you on each Fedimint server, it's like a Bitcoin node. Bitcoin nodes are auditing effectively and checking the Bitcoin network 24 hours a day, 7 days of sleep, 7 days a week. So even while you're asleep, they're doing that action. So it's the same with a Fedimint node. Each one of the guardians have to download the Fedimint software, spend the setup process. We've got it down to 5 minutes. We're hoping to get it down to be even less than that. But once it's set up, it's operating it is like operating a Bitcoin node, i.e., your job is to not touch it. That's your job, is to just guard it. That's where you're going to go. And you just have to keep it fed and watered with internet and electricity. If it somehow turns off, you have a power cut, turn it back on, and the Fedimint soft protocol will handle reconnecting and resynchronizing. You don't have to deal with any of that stuff. Just like with Bitcoin nodes, if you restart it, it will catch up automatically.
Amazing.
So yes, they will have to do that, but they could be asleep. This is why I was saying, well, what happens if all the guardians die? Well, as long as you don't at the same time, simultaneous the point they die, that all machines explode, you could still, you'd probably want to take your Bitcoin off, but as long as the majority of those machines are running, you can still operate the network, because you could probably even they are not the machine themselves though.
If you set it up with like degrading multi-sig time locks with a mini script,
yes, in future, that sort of stuff.
Do like dead man switch stuff, like
exactly, all that sort of stuff we're looking at for enhancements in future, and we're excited because of things like
this is incredible
simplicity and mini scripts, and when there are eventual enhancements to Bitcoin, we can implement those and upgrade to even more. But even today, it's great.
Yeah, and on the technical side of that is that the way that I think it's going to go is that there's a lot of stuff that we'd like to get into Bitcoin that we are currently using in Fedimint, right? So for example, one example is that the way that we do Fedimint transactions, we do cross-input signature aggregation, right? Which is like a fancy thing, cryptography thing that we would like to get into Bitcoin eventually. What the Fedimints can end up being is kind of like really cool places where all of this cutting edge stuff that you'd want to do, you want to have like, hey, we're using this with real money, is that you can make a federation with you and your friends, or you and your family, or you and your community. And you can say, hey, we want to use the most cutting edge cryptography on stuff. And this is something that's like already been reviewed. It's already given stuff. Like the thing we're waiting on is for it to get deployed into Bitcoin. And so like, let's say that we wanted something like CTV, for example. That's something that you could implement as part of the contracting system within Fedimint, and then you could show a wider use case of like, hey, this is my community of developers, and we're all leveraging this stuff. And then eventually, that's like a use case, that a demonstration that it's safe and it works, and it's more of a case for.
So you don't need Litecoin anymore.
Justin always talks about something that people always talk about permissionless innovation, but you now have truly permissionless innovation here, where you can try a feature, and if it's popular, more federations will pick it up. And one of the challenges in terms of protocol adoption of new things is we have to predict the future. Do people really want this or not? And no one knows. There's no one can answer that question. But if you're trying on these federations, and all of a sudden, a year later, 70% of federations are installing this module. We call them modules. It's like apps, web apps or mobile apps. We call them Fedimint modules. And if they're all using this Fedimint module, maybe you can now objectively say that this functionality is wanted by the community. You no longer need to guess. And if no one's using it, then people don't want it. It's like conversation over.
Man, okay, we've been going for almost 2 hours now, and we didn't even get to really the AI for All hackathon. I've got more stuff I want to talk about. What do you guys want to do? Do you want to like maybe do a part 2 or something, or do you want to just keep going for a bit?
I'm gonna have to bounce in like 15 minutes.
Yeah, I will have to also go in like, and I'll run out of power on my phone and my headsets in about 10-15 minutes. So maybe a part 2. Does that make sense, Kody?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, we can briefly talk about it.
Go straight into the AI.
Yeah,
let's maybe talk about it.
Yeah, sure. If I can just give like a quick pitch for it, right? So this is how I originally like met Brad, right? Was that for when it comes to like this AI blowing off and stuff, and it even comes with like federations too, right? Of that, like for like Kevin Rook, I was on his show recently, and he asked me a good question. He was like, "Hey, what are some good examples of like working federated systems that have been deployed at scale and working for these things?" And my answer was like, "Hey, well, basically, you're really limited in the way that you do that. And the reason why is because there's no real thing that you can do on the payments layer and value transfer layer when it comes to a federated model." And so one of the things for that, and this is something that it took me a while to realize, like this is why it's like, hey, important to become on the developer side so you can understand their problems, is that for developers, right, is like you can't even hold people's credit cards. You have to use a third-party credit card processor if you want to do payments, right? Like you're not even allowed to hold the credit card information, right? And so when it comes to, hey, why haven't there been federated applications have been deployed at scale and all this kind of stuff? Well, there's no payment mechanism that you can use. The moment you try to use a payment mechanism of credit cards or like dollars in any way, you have to use a third-party processor. And so kind of the point of the federation sort of goes out the window as you do that. But now with Bitcoin and Lightning, we have a value transfer layer that we can use at these federated levels. And so now it becomes, well, the federation can operate and the federation can do its value transfer and it's interoperable with the rest of the network. Well, now you have sort of the building blocks in place in order to do that. And so it's the same thing for AI agents, right? Of that, this is like a huge, and AI generally now, is that AI is running into this problem where you can think about every time you try to use AI, you're like setting a graphics card on fire, right? And you can't just allow people to set your graphics cards on fire. You have to pass that cost along to them, right? And so the way that people are currently doing it is they're saying, okay, the only people who get to do this are people who can maintain a credit card and Stripe doesn't block them and they're never going to do a chargeback and there's zero risk of them doing a chargeback because like it's just like completely replete with chargeback issues going all across the entire industry right now. And so what people are doing is they're basically saying, hey, you have to use Stripe for this stuff, right? Because Stripe has like this giant credit card chargeback fraud management thing. And so they all go third party. Well, now with Bitcoin, we can pass these costs along to the user. So there's really no issue of chargebacks, right? Because you can't do a chargeback on a Lightning payment. It's a bearer instrument that you do final settlement immediately. And so all this stuff with AI, because now we're in this world where API calls are no longer free. You have to pass the costs along to the user some way. You can't be at risk of all these chargebacks. This is like a perfect use case for Bitcoin as it exists today. And that's, I think, the really critical part for it, right? Of that, we don't require any changes to Bitcoin in order to meet this use case. Right? Like as it exists today, Bitcoin has very, very, very good sender side privacy. So if I'm somebody trying to use a service and pay with Bitcoin with it, I have very good privacy, right? So the company deploying the AI, they're not as concerned with privacy, right? Because they're a public company. They're like, hey, I want you to pay me. I want you to know who I am, right? But if you want to take this service and you want to offer it up to a bunch of different users, right? Currently, the way that you offer it up is you say, okay, tell me who you are, tell me all your credit card information, which gets stored in a third party. It's not me, right? So you're trusting the credit card processor as well. And tell me all the information I can use in order to contact you in the event that there's a chargeback and something goes wrong with the debt relationship, right? But with Bitcoin, you can just say, okay, you're passing the costs along to you directly. I don't need a debt relationship with you. I don't need to know who you are after you leave my site. And you paid for my service as you used it while you were on the site. Well, now I can just like pass that cost along to you. I don't have to know anything about you except for the fact that you paid me, right? And Lightning works very, very, very well for that specifically right now. Doesn't require any changes. And so it's like there's this big budding industry with a huge monetization problem. And we've got Bitcoin over here with a bunch of tools and services that as it exists today can meet those problems. And that's why we're so excited for this kind of intersection between the two of these.
This again was in December of last year. I also did another tweet. I don't do many, but December I did 2 or 3. One was it was an AI tweet, and it basically stated that 2 things I was predicting was going to happen. One is that it's going to become increasingly clear to AI companies that to get to global scale, they've effectively had a way of democratizing access to intelligence. And who doesn't want to have access to this super intelligent being at your whim? Everybody. This is a globally desirable product. But if they want to access the maximal market, they have to be able to take payment from billions of people who don't have even the bank accounts to be able to pay, or the credit card services. So if they want to limit their market, then they can do what they're currently doing. But if they don't want to limit their market, then they have to support a payment system that can accept payment from people who don't have credit cards, who don't have bank accounts, because they're cutting out 50% of their market otherwise. So, and the only thing that comes anywhere close to being able to do that is Bitcoin and Lightning. And so it's just very, very obvious. The other side is, for various reasons, a large part of training these large language models does involve humans, especially some of the best ones. They use something called reinforcement learning with human feedback. So therefore, these at scale, and as time goes by, especially when you want to have these specially optimized AIs, you're going to need to you receive money for providing an answer question, but for 2 reasons. 1, because for training and feedback, and 2, for rights and IP potentially, which is becoming increasingly big issue. You're going to need to make out tons of small payments as well on the back end of these AIs to pay the people who are the sources of the data. Because over time, once people start realizing that I cannot make money from advertising, it's just a logical conclusion. They're going to start saying, okay, I'm going to have to charge you for accessing my data that you're using to your AI. It was just so obvious at the time that those 2 things are going to happen. On the back end, they're going to have to make up tons of little micro payments to people anywhere in the world to be able to act. Otherwise, they limit the amount of data they can access. And at the front end, they're going to have to take payment in Bitcoin and Lightning. Otherwise, they limit the amount of people. And if they limit themselves where someone else doesn't limit themselves, that person who's unlimited will grow bigger than the one who's limited. It's just because they have a bigger market. So they will, even if they're the biggest today, if they intentionally nobble themselves, they will be taken over by someone who just provides the same service without nobbling themselves. We're seeing it with Twitter. Twitter is intentionally nobbling itself right now. So Facebook has just come along and they've just given them an opportunity to make literally a cookie cutter replica product without the limitations. And if they don't go back to providing an unlimited service, it will be taken over. And Nostr is doing the same. It's the same product without the limitations. So the same will happen for AI. It will naturally move to the people who have, the people who are winners are the people with the largest set of data they can access and the largest set of people they can charge for it. That requires Bitcoin, it requires Lightning.
Yeah, just like a context thing for yesterday, right? Because like I go on the Bitcoin side, right? So like all the like payments and donations and like all those kinds of things that I normally work with on the Bitcoin side. So I'm like, I kind of like got accustomed to like, you can send 1 sat or whatever, like who cares, right? Like yesterday I was doing a live stream with an AI developer, McKay Wrigley, right? And there was like a big unlock thing for me where I showed him like, hey, this is how easy it is to integrate Bitcoin using WebLN payments or whatever, right? And I was just like sent him 10 sats. And he was like, dude, the minimum payment that Stripe lets me do is $2.
Of course.
Right? Is that like the minimum payment that he can do, and it's the only thing he can use for gating access for this stuff, right? Is because,
of course, and this is where so in my period of time as a CTO, this was Web 1.0 companies, which are e-commerce companies, and Web 2.0 companies, social media companies, and especially when you get to things like social media companies and so on, you want to sometimes provide very small amounts of things of value. But there is just no way of charging for that. So you then have to come up with these complex schemes where you ask for a certain amount of money up front, even though it might take people years to pay over, especially if the thing is low enough value, or you artificially increase the price of the product so that it doesn't hang around for a lot. Then you have to deal with chargebacks. it's just incredible complexity, and it's not a good user experience. We now have the ability to provide that, and what we were looking for, and there are many options, many examples. One is social media with things like Nostr and Zaps, but another one is AI, and this is a product that everyone everywhere in the world will want and desire, and the only way you're going to give it to everyone everywhere in the world is with Bitcoin, and also pay for it. Increasingly, you're going to have to pay for it because you're taking data and you're mixing it together that is not yours, and then you're selling it off to someone else. At some point, people are going to want their cut of that as well. So both sides, you're going to need the problem solved.
So, okay, let's end it on this or get close to it. But I'm super bullish on what you guys are doing and what Kody's doing, and just in general, the Bitcoin use case for AI. It just makes sense. It's like the censorship resistant internet native currency for artificial, digital intelligence. It's the digital money for digital intelligence. It makes perfect sense. It's more scalable, done through Lightning Network and probably eCash than it is on any blockchain system. So people are starting to come to that realization. I've got AI friends who are not Bitcoiners. They're maybe they're just crypto adjacent. They're aware of Bitcoin, and maybe they've done DeFi startups or something because they got money from VCs. They're even starting to see that, like, yeah, Lightning Network actually is the solution here. The question is, so tens of billions, maybe even 100 billion or more VC money funneled into the Web3 DeFi Ponzi-nomic, Ponzification schemes of 2021 and 22. And they're just like the Hindenburg, right? It's actually just blowing up, and people are fleeing to AI. A lot of people are moving to AI. Some people are languishing around, still trying to build their Web3, token scheme thing. But there's a lot of money still in the treasuries of these DeFi crypto sort of A16Z funded companies that are pivoting to AI. And there's a lot of perverse incentives there that they have a, predilection to take a Solana solution rather than the real solution, which is Bitcoin. And a lot of the AI people, like the developers and the influencers in the AI space, they don't have any preference towards a crypto solution or a Bitcoin solution. They're just trying to build technology, but they're being marketed to by these super wealthy VCs that have big, huge bags of shitcoins. So, like, what is our best chance, and how do we fix that problem? Or is it fixable, or are we just going to have to deal with, Lightning and Bitcoin and what we're building is the better solution, but we're just going to have to deal with, they're also going to use Solana. They're also going to use stable coins because they're getting paid to integrate with XYZ blockchain. What do you guys paint a picture for me for, like, how can we, as non-devs, as Bitcoin holders, as angel investors, as whatever we are, Bitcoiners, help with, like, the world realizing that Lightning is the solution, and like, how to think about this going forward?
I think you should just point people to, there's a few things. One, we have the momentum with us. So I look at multiple metrics, and I've been doing it for over a decade, and pretty much everything is positive towards Bitcoin, whatever angle you look at it right now. And I think it's pretty obvious to Bitcoiners at this stage. So it's all happening there. So you can keep people pointing to what's happening in all sort of quarters, whether you're wanting to look at what's happening in terms of adoption, whether you wanted to look at the technical maturity of the system, whether you wanted to look at what's happening in VC dollars going into the Bitcoin ecosystem, into the Lightning infrastructure, and so on. That's growing and increasing adoption. Or whether you want to look at, even though we don't want to make this our main argument, but you want to look at what's the clear regulatory divide between those others and this. Then I think specifically to AI, what you're going to see happen is people are going to try and make an AI coin or so on. But it's a very bad product market fit. And these people need to solve problems today. They need to find a way of something that's accepted by people today in everywhere in the world where they don't have easy access to credit cards to pay for this service, for example, and also is able to make payments of very small amounts. Because even again with stablecoins, it's very hard to make a stablecoin payment for a fraction of a penny without paying very high fees on it and being able to do it as fast, and especially when you compare to the cost of Lightning, and even more so with the cost of eCash, you just cannot compare with it on speed and price. So if you're charging for something and then you're going to have to uplift the price or cut into your margins because of the relative costs of all these alternatives, is you're going to, as a commercial business, go with the one with the widest market and the lowest cost and the highest speed to use. So I feel like let them come along, because when you compare, you say try the two and compare the two in terms of experience, the experience as a user for using it, you in terms of the margins or the amount that you're going to have to uplift on the price. And it becomes very clear that for these sort of payments of these small services and so on, the eCash, Lightning, Bitcoin triumvirate is a much better offering than a hodgepodge of different stablecoins on different platforms. And, how am I paying? You're paying with stablecoin. Okay, which stablecoin? Is it this, that, the other? Oh, X. Okay, X is a stablecoin. Fine. Which network? Is it X?
Yeah.
And then that's a terrible user experience versus scan a QR code, pay. So we'll win on the UX experience. We'll win on the adoption experience, and we win on the very clear positive directions and clarity for Bitcoin, when right now there's just complete lack of clarity for for everything else other than Bitcoin.
Yeah. If I can add just a couple things for it, right, is that there's kind of this joke within Bitcoin, right? It's like when people bring up the environmental criticisms of Bitcoin, it's like you kind of chuckle to yourself and plug in more ASICs, right? And when it comes to like AI, I think like there's a whole group of people within AI. There's like the kind of like the AI safety people, and then there's the accelerationist guys, and they're kind of taking the same approach of that. It's like, chuckle to yourself and plug in more GPUs and train more open source models and just continue like pumping stuff out for this stuff, right? And like, I really think that this is like starting to happen within Bitcoin now, because all of the infrastructure is sort of set in terms of like Lightning is here at this point. Bitcoin is set at this point of that we can go off and we can start building all this stuff and sort of cypherpunks write code, right? Of like, we solve our problems by writing code for this stuff. Is that this is the reaction that I've been getting from everyone, because like I live in San Francisco, I go to all these AI events, right? And I tell them and I tell them like, hey, this like solves all your problems in all these different ways, and their answer is show me, right? And that's why we did this hackathon and why we're kind of like just doing this stuff in terms of like just showing them that this works, right? Because it's all well and good to say, hey, Bitcoin fixes this abstractly, but it's entirely different from when you see, hey, this one company adopted Bitcoin and is using it in order to scale out their AI models, and they can open up to everybody. They don't have to have a wait list. They don't have to have a bring your own API key. They can service every single country in the entire world, and they can pass along the costs of, even though it costs me 10 cents for every time that a user visits, that user is paying me 10 cents and 1/1000th of a Bitcoin or whatever, right? Along with that, right? So the person who does that is always profitable. We take that company and we show that to everyone else, right? That's like the big thing that's going to solve a lot of this stuff, right? And so I think that's the way to solve it.
I was a little bit, I told you this a month ago, Kody. I was like a little bit frantic about this. I was so excited by the idea, but I was also sort of like looking at this, like lots of like carrot money that the VCs have and the bags of shitcoins they have, and how I was like worried that we were going to kind of lose this battle, because Bitcoin sometimes loses narrative battles to way more organized and funded VC sort of like shitcoin people. But then I kind of was more heartened when I saw what Alu and you and others were doing, but mostly what you and him are doing with like going to hackathons and actually building Bitcoin stuff and showing these AI people like, hey, Bitcoin works for this. And so you had told me about the founder of Replit is like, you're doing this AI hackathon and the Replit founders behind it. And he has like learned about Bitcoin and is like friends with Fedimint Moose. And, all these things sort of gave me some hope here that maybe, just maybe this time AI and Bitcoin might not be, the bags of money that these VCs are going to be throwing around might not be as effective as like the Bitcoiners actually going out and doing the work, even if it's not as much of us doing the work.
Well, for us, right, it's also to think about, right, is that like we have been spending the last like dozen years or whatever it is that however long Bitcoin has been along, making really, really good money, right? And like what a lot of the crypto guys did was they said, okay, well, money's interesting, but you can also do all this other stuff. And now we're coming back to of like, hey, all of this infrastructure that we built for making instant finally settled payments, all those things that people were saying like, oh, well, payments is all interesting or whatever. We could put real estate on the blockchain or whatever, or we could do this other stuff. Well, all of that payments infrastructure that we built for Lightning, that's all set and that's good to go. And that works now, right? It's not 2018 anymore, right? It's like Lightning, like I think River's internal, they published their internal metrics for this, and so did OpenNode, right? Is they were like, hey, like 99% of the time, like we get like first time success on our Lightning payments now, right? Like the infrastructure, the network is there for Lightning, for this to be a reliable thing for us to bring to other people and say, hey, this is working, this works, this is good to go now, right? And so all of these other cryptos are kind of playing catch up, right? Because they're like, hey, well, in order for me to be able to do something as fast as Lightning, I can't do this at the base layer. I need some sort of layer 2 for this thing. Like all the like money that went into, I think it's called like Raiden or something. They were going to make a Lightning network on Ethereum or whatever. That all got reallocated to doing different things or whatever. But now they're like, oh, well, now we need some sort of like instant finally settled payment mechanism like Lightning, right? So like this is one of those things where like Bitcoin is like way ahead in the race, and specifically on this aspect of it, right?
Yeah,
you
and I think and just before I do want to add confirm. Proof of work is really important. And when I mean proof of work in this case, actually getting out there and showing people this stuff working has a big effect as opposed to talking about it. And this is why, Kody came on board. An objective is to do things like this, hackathon. Now that we have something and Fedimint is got to a certain stage and Lightning is at a certain stage and Bitcoin is, we should just show people again and again and again and again, because sometimes talking about it is one thing. If you use it to do something for even 5 minutes, you will get it to a level that would take 10 hours of discussion. Second is we have to remember that we have all of this momentum with multiple different other angles all happening at the same time. So technology is there, but there is now a strong VC community who's able to deploy significant capital that's interested in this space. We're also seeing regulatory clear clarity about Bitcoin and clear clarity that there's no clarity about every other crypto. And all of these things are happening at the same time. This is why it reinforces each other. Imagine you being that person in your AI company who's been looking at Bitcoin. Now we can come along and give you examples so that you can show it how it works. And at the same time, the narrative globally and in the news is also massively pro what's happening with Bitcoin as well. So it becomes easier for you to explain to people why Bitcoin is not the same as all the other crypto as well, which is another part of the discussion. That's much easier, even in the last week, over a month ago. If you think about what's happened in the last week, just to make it really clear, Bitcoin is not crypto. So this all helps together, and that's why this is the year it all happens, where it all comes together.
Well, listen, awesome conversation. It was good to meet you, Obi, and Kody. Only talked to a couple times, but definitely inspired by what you're doing. Also that mission that you're on to sort of like go out there and orange pill the AI people at the hackathons. I mean, that's Satoshi's work, right? So I was inspired to support the hackathon and sponsor the hackathon through Satoshi Money. Or layer 3, I think is the name, whatever. I'm sponsoring it. I'm supporting it. And I'm totally willing to kind of match Jack. If Jack Dorsey wants to throw up $5,000, I'll match another $5,000. If you're listening, Jack, I don't know if he watches my live streams though, but do you want to, because it was very inspirational, sort of motivational. It's a good analogy, an anecdote that you had told me on the phone. The sort of David Chaum inflection point that we're at right now, where we got an opportunity here to not screw
sure.
up. Do you want to finish us off on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is the I think I first heard it from Callie, right, where he was kind of going through this. But you think about for how payments work on the internet and how payments work for software and all this kind of stuff. And we have this sort of gargantuan, giant surveillance system used with credit cards, right? Of that, like it didn't have to be that way. And so back during in like Windows 95, David Chaum doing DigiCash, he like was very close to closing a deal with Microsoft, so they would ship DigiCash with every single copy of Windows 95, right? And that was going to be the payments layer that we're going to use. And the reason why they did it was because it was faster. You just accidentally also got really good privacy, right? And that thing, like, you know, like based on the stories for it, is that David Chaum's ego kind of gets in the way, and like they blow up that deal. You have the same sort of opportunity come up a couple of years later when internet commerce starts taking off, and Visa is looking to start playing in the game, and they say, okay, hey, DigiCash is kind of the best and fastest way to do this thing. We want to have a deal with them. We're going to use them as the layer for this stuff. And sort of same situation goes, like the deal just doesn't happen. It doesn't go through. But like instead of having this whole like credit card system and credit system that we're using over here with chargebacks, with like 30-day delayed settlements and those kinds of things, right? We could have been using eCash, right? But you just got to make sure that you seize the opportunity and you don't let the ego get in the way, and you just make it happen when the opportunity is there. And so with AI, we've got this new computing paradigm that's coming out that has a clear and obvious monetization problem that everyone is feeling really, really hard right now, right? And there's basically limitations on the way that they're using the existing structure, the stuff that Bitcoin like is already better than, but Bitcoin is ready for. And so now the question is, do we seize this opportunity and do we kind of move in that direction, and do we like take advantage of this, or do we like go slow? We allow them to adapt. We allow them to set up and like establish the network effect and the standard. And basically this becomes the way that they do things, right? And so I think we're in this really cool golden opportunity of that. Now Bitcoin becomes the layer for doing payments for anything that you want to do associated with AI. And that becomes, well, now because AI is infecting everything else, it's bringing Bitcoin with it, right? So all the stuff that we'd like Bitcoin to also be used in front of, because this is like, I've been talking to a lot of people about this, right? And they're like, hey, a lot of things that we do with Bitcoin is like, yeah, sure, you can also do the same thing with dollars though, and dollars have the bigger network effect, and it's also easier. And so we're doing it that way. Like AI really feels like one of these ones, and I'm seeing this myself, is that it's one of those things where dollars cannot solve this problem, right? And so can we solve the problem, or do we like slow down and then dollars end up adapting, or they create a regulatory moat around it or something like that, right? Such that we can't take advantage of the opportunity.
I'm thinking of Eminem, 8 Miles, Lose Yourself. You know, this is our opportunity, our warm spot, and we won't miss the chance to blow. Opportunity comes in once in a lifetime, so we won't make the mistake.
It is it is an inflection point, and there's an opportunity at this moment, maybe for a month or 2 months or something. Maybe it's longer if we're lucky, but maybe it's not. And I've been trying my best to go out and get people aware of what, you know, you guys are doing with the AI for All hackathon. It seems difficult to motivate people, but you're going out there, you're talking to people. That's what needs to happen. If anybody's inspired listening to this or whatever, like what's something that they can do that's even the smallest way to like make an impact and trying to help us take advantage of this moment we have. That's
yeah, I mean, the big one is, like I was saying, right? Every Bitcoiner developer is that, like, even if you're not very experienced and even if you're just trying to learn, like the way that I got good at coding was by doing hackathons, right? Because like you write code, you put it out there, you get critiqued by other people, you get like very fast feedback loops in terms of like the quality of your code and making it better and being exposed to new things. So even if you're not like a world-class coder or whatever, you just want some experience, like I'd love to see you joining the hackathon. We're doing tons of really good educational content around it, of like how to do the lightning side of things, how to do the AI side of things, how to like bring the two together, right? And so that'll be super good. So I'd love to see as many people as possible joining in and like participating. And so instead of like, hey, go out and like evangelize to everybody else, like that's always nice, it's always helpful and all those kinds of things. Like I'd love to see just everybody in the Bitcoin community like submitting projects for these things, because like we've got really good educational stuff around this. And once you see it and once you try it yourself, you're going to see that this is like a really cool opportunity, a really cool way of building. Right?
And if anybody's inspired to sponsor, I mean, if you know what's the best way to get in touch with you guys to sponsor some bounties on Replit or something to help with showing the AI community that, hey, Bitcoiners are going to open up our wallets and spend some sats on building some AI tools.
Yep. So I'm on Twitter. We can also go to bolt.fund/tournament/AI for all. Right. So the hackathon's called AI for all. And then we've also got like a Discord up there, but also like Twitter is kind of like where a lot of this stuff happens. Right. So it's just at Kody Low on Twitter. or from Fedi, we're also tweeting about it a bunch, right? So like at Fedi BTC.
Well, I currently think that like this Bolt Fun sort of AI for all hackathon, the thing that you're doing like with building tools that link LN with AI, that is, I think, currently the most important thing happening in Bitcoin for at least the next month or two until, you know, whatever. But then in the next like year or two, the Fedi stuff is actually one of the things, Obi, that I think is one of the most important things for Bitcoin in terms of network effects and Bitcoin adoption. So like awesome to have you both on the show, and I'm going to continue to look forward to working with you on the AI hackathon stuff, Kody and Obi. I'd love to continue chatting on the community side of things. Maybe we'll do round 2, but yeah, I've just been thinking about how do we evolve the Bitcoin meetup and really show up locally in our communities and start making impact, improve Bitcoin's brand, and reduce harm from centralized exchange collapses. But more so just like evolve the Bitcoin meetup so that we have this army of Bitcoiners locally that are socially meeting up. The next decade of Bitcoin, I think, is going to be more about like making an impact and actually getting organized and doing more than just meeting up for drinks and talking about Bitcoin. It's like actually showing up and making a change in your local community. And Fedi seems like it's going to be a big part of potentially that evolution of the Bitcoin meetup.
We hope to be part of that, and we're confident that we will be. But it's clear for us to understand that we're only a part of it. And what's really powerful here is that everybody's showing up in the entire Bitcoin community, showing up to the party, and this is going to be fun, taking this to the world.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the chat, guys.
Yep.
Thank you very much, matey.
Thanks,
great to meet you.
I'll talk to you guys again sometime soon, hopefully.
Totally.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.